Hello, everyone. Welcome to You Brand Your Business. It's been 84 years since we last did this. You can blame tax time because that basically knocks out at least Ernest, often me, and Noah doesn't want to run the show by himself, which is fair. So welcome back. It's good to see you guys. The first thing that we all need to do is congratulate Ernest for getting engaged this past weekend.
What?
Oh,
yes.
Congratulations! How did no one tell me this?
That happened. Yep.
That's the first thing we need to do.
I posted on Twitter about it, so you can go see that. But I did it. So thank you. She said yes.
Wait, I get to do this now. Hey, production, there's an extra G at the end of my last name.
Oh.
All right. Anyways.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. So big congrats to Ernest. It's awesome. So this is Your Brand, Your Business. It's a show where we talk about the business side of streaming because, as we've said over and over and over again, believe it or not, you guys are businesses. I'm Galen and Cortina. I'm a financial planner who works with streamers. Ernest is my co-host for today. Ernest, give him a bit about you.
I'm Ernest Jones, recently engaged, and I was told I have to do that, so she'd be very mad. And I'm a CPA who assists broadcasters, game devs, cosplayers, basically anyone in and around our industry with their tax problems.
Sorry, now I'm Herbstick Cortina GG. I'll take it. That's honestly better. That's more on brand, right? Just .gg.
Yeah, you missed the dot.
And our topic for today is working with agencies, which makes it only slightly awkward that we have someone from a management group here. Josh, will you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about you.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Josh, if that wasn't evident. Josh Belkin, as the name may be. I've been in the gaming industry for almost a decade now, which is terrifying to think about, but we're here. I've been managing streamers in various capacities, but with both between stream teams as well as just individuals for 7 years, I think, 6 years. I actually don't know how long it's been. I'd have to check. It's been a while though. I can't. I'm trying to remember the timeline.
It was the
kind
party,
of has
right?
blurred.
Was the...
Well, so prior to the party, it was main menu, which I was helping out. And then, so that was I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years that I was there, and then the party for about 2 years, and then more recently, I kind of took a step back from the team-focused side of things, and it's been just individually focused with Broaden, which that is actually the first time I think I've ever talked about it publicly. It's very much, but yeah, it's never really been, the focus was never really anything public. It was working behind the scenes and just supporting friends that were in the industry that needed the help, the sounding board, or whatever in between. And the way it actually started was that there were a couple streamers that had asked me to help manage their businesses, and both Joel or Shangitlaw, who was in the chat, as well as Noah, yelled at me and were like, "Stop helping your friends set up a business and make sure that it's done properly." And so here we are. So I've been happily just helping people where I can with their careers since then, because that's how I get by with surviving this insane pandemic.
Fourth, fifth concurrent business
slash
job.
Not entirely. So a lot of it's kind of merged, and it all bleeds together at the end of the day. Tom, who co-owns the software side of what I do, because in a different life I was a programmer, has kind of come on board to help with some of the management stuff and process and organization and streamlining some of the things. And so the waters have kind of just merged into one with that. And then outside of that, I've done a lot of consulting work for Tiltify and a couple other businesses in the space that are trying to understand how to work with content creators and live streamers, as the case may be. Because it goes both ways. Streamers are trying to understand how to work with brands, and brands are trying to understand what the hell we do.
Unlike for the boomers that watch the show, Josh is basically the epitome of a 5-tool player. Like he can swing, he can play the field, he can do it all.
A 5-cat if you're looking at NBA Fantasy League.
But
he's a 5-cat beast.
Shout out to Joel in the chat, the godfather of this show.
I, first of all, disagree, given what he said about me.
That's fair, actually. But so I'm going to go ahead and tilt Josh off the face of the earth. So one thing that happens in this very young industry, because I mean, how old would you date the industry? Like actually like new media as a way to earn a living and be full-time?
I would say it's probably, if like broad spectrum, somewhere between just shy of 10 years and maybe 11.
Yeah. YouTube in 2006, right? Twitch 2011, officially Justin TV before that, and the first partners about that same time.
So I remember, like, when I started managing streamers in my day,
we're gonna get a lot of that.
When I started working with streamers, it was right around at the time I was working for Curse as a shoutcaster, and that was kind of, we were doing commentary and hosting content, and that was in the general time frame where partnership was becoming accessible enough to streamers where it could be, you know, something where they could viably make some income on the side. If we were going to like realistic scope, where the first time we saw people really starting to go full time and doing it as a career, I think like loose assessment would be 7.5, 8 years ago, I think is really when we saw people starting to be able to financially stabilize themselves enough to make a push, at least within the Twitch ecosystem. JTV had some people that predated that because they had already been creating content, and a lot of those were more so YouTubers that were just trying out the live environment. So they already had their own content stability financially. But
yeah, so on that though, so and I bring that young industry up because a lot of the terminology nomenclature gets used interchangeably or incorrectly for, you know, traditionally what it means, you know, like the tips versus donations thing. We're not going to send you on your 2-minute rant.
Not going on that tangent.
But if you ever want to do it on the show,
at least two of us are wearing actual charity shirts, right? So
yeah,
yes.
Well, we will give you carte blanche to just go on an hour rant on the show.
I can do that on another episode.
Okay. So, but specifically, you mentioned management and agencies. You know, I think those terms get used a lot interchangeably. I mean, we're not holding you to the legal definition if you just broadly want to define that for people.
Yeah, so I think the biggest like assessment of it, right, is agencies are there to solicit deals and specifically work on career opportunities like jobs for actors, actresses, musicians. They book gigs, they get auditions, they focus more on like a talent side traditionally. And management has a slightly broader scope, and it's not to say that agencies can't be managers as well, but a lot of times they do carve that line in the sand, whereas management takes a much wider focus of career as well as, you know, life, business operations, like broad spectrum. How do we help run the business for this person so that they can just focus on creating and entertaining and providing the source of outlet that they do in the world for the people that they provide that for. Which is why I've stayed on the management side.
How often would you say that is misused, where someone talks about their agent versus
those
their
lines
manager?
Are so blurred in our industry because there has not been. I think the assessment for this industry as a whole is that there has been such a need for both, and oftentimes because the monetary stability of traditional media has not seeped into this space as prevalently. We see a lot more people that are just doing everything to help their clients get by because they're both obligated to help see that their clients succeed. And it's like, you know, if someone asks you a question, you're not going to say, well, you have to talk to an agent for this. You answer the question. So I think a lot of times where like those lines get blurred, and like I even see that cross up when interacting with some of my own clients some days. You know, it's hasn't just permeated to a point of necessity yet, and so a lot of times those lines do blur.
So I think that's a good point you made, because it's going to get kind of off of our roadmap here. So how would you kind of, from your perspective on the management side, want to have those clear lines, right? Because you don't want to set expectations where, you know, someone can come to you for anything. You're going to help them, but, you know, do you delineate like, look, this is, you know, outside of something that I'm necessarily comfortable advising you. I'll give you my perspective. And, you know, kind of how do you view that in terms of managing expectations?
So for my clients, if I have a direct answer, I provide the answer. If they ask me something that is fully out of the scope of my knowledge, I genuinely do go pull from other people. I will turn to, for example, YouTube. When my clients come to me with tax or financial planning questions, you guys are the first ones that I suggest, generally speaking, because you're dependable and you're in the space and you understand what they're doing with their careers. And that is more than a lot of people can say. Similarly, I'll pull from an example. I have a client that's pushing into the YouTube side of the world, and he went, "How the fuck do I do YouTube?" Which the answer is, I have no idea. I we all have broad assessments of like what you could do, but like I then pulled in, people that worked in MCNs. Like I went out to other people that have worked in the space in other capacities and started asking questions and pulling resources, which I think is at the end of the day what a lot of us end up doing to support the people that we work with. The same way that if you guys have someone come to you and ask a question that you don't know the answer of, like, exactly. I see you rolling your eyes, Galen.
I've literally sent sent Josh a text like, hey, I have someone asking me about how to price a sponsored Instagram post. Like, please help. It's not my world.
And there's a lot of assessment that goes into it that I think that is lost, and that is where a lot of those lines blur. It's like I stare at these numbers all day. I am not an agent, although I believe we are in the process of finalizing some of that. Fingers crossed.
As an agency, you have to actually register and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of registration and things that you have to go through for that process.
I know on my end, a lot of my industry regulations for the financial services have some overlap where they're talking about if you work for someone as an agent, and this is solely incidental to your work with them as an agent, then you're maybe exempt from these regulations. But you always run into the kind of thing of agents, the person who gets say NBA player money. So NBA player asks, what do I do with this money? You see a lot of agents who then go like, well, I'll just tell them. And it's like,
and it's interesting because there's similarly, there's lines in the sand of like compensation, right? As management, I can be, paid a salary. I can be compensated on a percentage of their income if they want to, or commission on things that I help them with. Like there's a lot of different avenues, whereas agents typically and traditionally work on a percentage fee of just opportunities that they in any capacity are involved in.
Right. Agent sources or negotiates deal, agent gets 10, 15%,
exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah, there's a range. I think upper echelon is 15%. Lower end I've seen is 5%. And this industry is very different to that. And I mentioned it briefly, but with some of the more traditional media cash flow, 5% for a traditional agency is a lot easier and more palatable to swallow than our industry, where the deals are missing a 0 or 2 at the end.
We were watching The Last Dance yesterday, and they one of the guys being interviewed was Jordan's agent. It's like, that guy probably has a one client career, and you know what? He clearly did a good job for him. Jordan ended up a billionaire, all sorts of outside stuff, right, that he probably helped with. But it's like, yeah, that's a one client career, and you aren't seeing that really. I feel like yet in our space.
Not here yet.
No.
So one thing I wanted to bring up is, how does a creator kind of know when it's time to start working with someone, either on the agency side or kind of on the management side? What should they be looking for?
I think, and to that topic, right, because there's a lot to really unpack there, is to start off, I think management as a, either support network, resource, etc., is needed a lot earlier for content creators in this space. Having someone that can help behind the scenes to coordinate things. I mean, moderators are, the first step in like really getting into the realm of management, right? Moderators help with the day-to-day, they help with tech, they help with, their business functioning, which is effectively the function of a manager. So I think that a lot of what we start to see is that, and it's needed a lot sooner because there really are a lot more needs and hurdles that have to be assessed. I think there is no one answer to when agency-esque services are needed. And the reason for that, I guess I should provide as much clarity as possible. I've seen creators with, 15 viewers, but have opportunities pouring in for specific things, right? Like if I have a great voice setup, say, I might only have 10, 20 viewers, but suddenly I'm getting contacted for voice acting work and for, this, that, and the other, for other sorts of opportunities. There's a need for it at that point if you aren't comfortable managing that sort of interaction yourself, versus I think a lot more of the traditional content creators that we see on the platform. The need comes into play at a much later portion, I think, when the deals that are being negotiated are no longer affiliate deals, is really where I start to look at it. And it's like, even if you start to trudge into the area of like, I'm only making $100 for this entire campaign, I'm doing 5 hours of content, right? It's having that discussion, even if it's with someone who just understands the numbers. That's where it really starts to be needed to say, like, you should be charging a bit more, or like, let's renegotiate around these deliverables or these line items. Because I think the big thing is having someone in your court that understands what you're dealing with and what you're going through and the interactions you're having, so that if you're getting screwed over, like, they know what to look out for. The same way that, having a lawyer check over those contracts is paramount, because it, like, likeness clauses is enough of a baseline. I have conversations with people all the time when they're like, what the hell am I doing with my business? Where I'm like, what have you signed thus far? And we start to dig into like what should and shouldn't be signed and what you should be willing to flex around, versus where you just like hard cut off, like perpetual likeness, for example.
Right.
So,
I imagine some of that too comes down to the content creator in question's background. Like, to use I believe, common client's example, Negorix used to work for a Hollywood talent agency. She has a better sense of how these things run than your average person, right?
Yeah.
With that background. So that's probably a part of it. And then I imagine there's some level too around just what else is going on in life. If you're streaming part-time or in evenings and you're working and you're married with a kid, you probably need someone to help step in earlier, just because you don't have the time to manage all of that. Comes the trade-offs question of when is the mixture of your time and expertise exceeded, by the potential opportunity lost from not having someone who knows what they're doing.
One of the big things that I look at, and it's, I have to reflect inward with this one a lot of times, but is, if I spend an hour dealing with this, what can I do in that hour that isn't this? And like, I know, Galen, we've had, without referencing any clients, I've know that you've had this conversation of like, how many hours a week are you spending doing even just your laundry? Get a service. If you spend $20 a week on this service, or whatever the price point is, what can you do with that extra few hours a month that you've now recovered? Can you read a book? Can you go for a walk?
Right.
Can you do something that's, can that $80, $100 alleviate hours of stress for you? If the answer is yes, then it's like, cool, pay for it. Find a resource where that makes sense. And that's a lot of times when I give focus to my clients of like, how can we take the biggest stress factors off your plate so that you feel like you're still accomplishing the same amount of things without having to lose sleep over it.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely weird for me the first time that I recommended that a client take a first class flight. I was not expecting that.
Such a satisfying moment.
Well, and they were flying halfway across the world to do a live performance and landing not too long before it. And so it's like, well, I hope you got a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
100%.
And a good night's sleep.
That's a fun conversation, because you can, like, that's a full expense, right? And they're like, what do you mean? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you want to perform well on the job, and it's necessary for you to perform well to get like a good night's sleep and not being coach. So
I had to tell my wife that Ernest told me I just bought the Spider-Man game now that I have a PS4 and I can write it off because of the industry that I work in. And I had to tell my wife, like, no, Ernest said I can write it off. It's fine.
Yeah,
I need this for work. I need Spider-Man, and I'm not J. Jonah Jameson.
I think one of the greatest things for me when we talk about write-offs was learning that I could, I don't necessarily have the money to splurge on with how much I travel to get first class every flight. But, some of the round trips where it's like $100 to get upgraded into like the extra comfort seating, that 6 inches of legroom for my sanity pays for itself.
Josh, very quickly, I've never told you my rant, but basically all you need is entry-level luxury. Like, you don't need first class, but you just need those 4 inches, right? You don't need the top shelf boobs. You just need the middle shelf, right? Entry-level luxury.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's for sanity and just that extra bit of like one step up. it makes such a difference. Like, I've flown first class. There's not much of like value add that you get from that, but that entry level, like, oh my God, it's night and day.
Exactly. Okay, so one thing I think no, this is good. Like I told you, Josh, we're not the most formal on the show.
No.
So one thing I think a lot of the kind of especially broadcasters are bootstrappers, right? They do everything. Okay, I'm going to do my production. I'm going to do my management. I'm going to do everything, right? So I'm sure they're like, well, I can do this myself, right? Kind of want you to talk about basically there comes that break point when it's not efficient for them to do it, the advantages of working with someone, and kind of the disadvantage from your perspective.
So I think one of the biggest advantages is just having someone who is routinely looking at that stuff, knowledgeable of the space, and dealing with these sorts of interactions. For example, right, I had a client that came to me asking some questions about a campaign that they were working on. And because I knew of another client that was actively working on the same campaign, I was able to earmark before they got involved with the campaign, hey, you should be paid a lot more for this one. Because I knew that the company had budget. I knew that they were working on larger promotions, and that my client, because they didn't think to ask for more. It's nuances like that. Some of the disadvantages, obviously, you're losing some of your income to have support.
Right.
The question of the day, though, is, if you lose 15% of your income, but triple your income, or, that's a bit exaggerated. Double.
Even if it goes up by 50%, right? Yeah.
Right. If you lose 15%, you're still gaining a 35% increase at that point. Like,
that's not exactly the math, but it's close. Yeah.
Because what I found, I think for a lot of creators, it's tough for them, not even that argument. I think it's just tough for them to see control. And kind of, so this is a very smooth, like podcasty type tangent. So here we go. So the thing about it is they see that control. Historically, it's a young industry, a lot of bad actors or people who don't necessarily know what they're doing. So how do you kind of test the mettle of someone? What kind of question should they be asking someone to see if this person actually has their best interest and knows what they're talking about?
Tough.
Yeah.
I think baseline is when you get into contract review, you see where a lot of the like hidden stuff comes out. What they say might not be the same as what's in writing. And that really shows a lot of their character when you compare what you're promised versus what you're given. I think questions, having a transparent conversation about rates. What do you charge? Where does this, where does the monetary side of things fall? What am I spending? What am I receiving? Like, having a very transparent discussion about that. Confirm who you're speaking with when you're being signed on is the same person you're working with long term. If you're meeting with someone who's just acquisitions and the person you're getting handed off to doesn't have your best interest at heart, why are they not in the call with you initially to have those discussions? I think that there's a lot around that should be addressed early on. I think having as well the discussion of what sort of, at the end of the day, that what they're looking at, it is beyond the question of how can we help you succeed. It is a question of what are you getting out of this for you? And, having the discussion of numbers, right? Are they willing to negotiate numbers, rates, etc.? I think is really where a lot of it lands. Just off the notion that, like, if they aren't willing to have that conversation, if they're that closed off, they aren't looking at you as a person, they're looking at you as a product. And that, I feel like, is where a very distinct line needs to be drawn, because if they aren't willing to have the discussion of, like, if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I think this is a good deal. I've done all the work on it. I've got someone looking over the legal, but, like, I just want to sanity check this with you, right? That one, I will reference one where, without naming names, a friend of mine had a campaign that he was working on. He had done all the negotiations. The contract had been reviewed. His management, who had an exclusivity contract, found out, and they basically came in and took over. And with that, they talked it up 10%. Their fee was 20%. Just because he had the candor to talk to them about it, they took some of the money he had already done the work on. That, to me, and it's like, if we were to reference other groups, it's a test of character as of the management, right? If they had looked at it and said, look, we were only able to talk this up 10%, we're not going to take the full 20%. We're going to forgo the difference. You did the legwork. Clearly, we're not doing anything at this point. You have to fulfill the deliverables, and you've done everything else. You've done our job. Like, it's scenarios like that. If they were to take a cut of something that had already been brought, and you're literally losing money on a campaign like that, to me is such a big sign. I'll reference a client whose campaign I directly worked on because he needed some help. I helped him talk to them about the rates because he felt like it was a little bit low. I could not move it up enough that I felt like it would warrant him compensating me for my time. And so I was just like, hey, you know what? Buy me a nice drink or a steak dinner at a conference.
Right.
Please enjoy it. I would rather you have a roof over your head. It's like I helped him address the difference of, some of his groceries for the month. Like, it is what it is at that point to me. And that's where I really look at, when we discuss character of people in the space, like that's really where I'm at. And, it's also a big question of if you're helping a person who you've worked with as, a moderator grow into a role to support you better, right? You're the one at that point having the same conversation, right? If you put yourself in the other side's shoes and you're talking to them about, this is what I can offer you in exchange for your continued support of this, right? It's, figuring out where that middle ground is.
It's kind of what you basically walk through was the thing that Galen and I have talked a lot about on the show is effectively when you're looking to work with someone, whether it's a professional or what have you, it's someone that you can work with, right? It's not just a kind of clear-cut relationship. Okay, look, these are the terms and it's unbending. I will source opportunities for you and you give me 20% cut. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that relationship as long as you kind of understand the state of play.
Yeah.
But I would say because the industry is so young, I think we're all trying to kind of elevate one another and push, the industry forward. So I think having that flexibility and again, someone, working with you and I only added the value of your groceries. I'm not going to charge you for it. Right. Yeah. I think is very important.
I think similarly to that end, it's a question of, when you get into these discussions, right, finding out what services they provide, finding the full scope of what you can lean on them for. A lot of times, and I find this even with some of my own clients, right, like they only come to me for certain things, and I'm like, do you need help with anything else? And we'll have the discussion of like, how can we help your career outside of that, And so I think it's a discussion of like, when you're first having these initial conversations, it's a question of how can we help you and how can you help me? It's like, it's a mutually beneficial relationship for both sides.
Do you find that, I'm laughing at Joel there, but do you find that...
tax Joel.
Do you find that game devs prefer working with managers where they can have a many-to-one relationship, or is that a hindrance?
So. Right. So right. I think
you're in the middle of it,
coin toss. Coin toss on that one specifically, right? I have definitely had some brands where they hire someone who is like, this is the person, they deal with all of these relations, and unless the client specifically says, please bring in my management to be a part of this discussion or my agency to be a part of this discussion, the brands would rather just directly interface with the influencer because it's less, less people in the middle, less relays in the game of telephone. That said, I also am quite familiar with some groups who prefer it because they can just, for example, for me, referencing self interest here, I have some groups that are like, we prefer to work with you guys because you guys, like, we have this working relationship that we've established. We can come to you and we know that you've vetted your clients.
Right.
We know that you guys have this rapport with us because we've worked on campaigns together in the past. So like there's a mix, so it varies from brand to brand and company to company. Some have experiences one way, some have them the other. And I don't think that there's any like one correct answer in that capacity. I think from my opinion, even as a neutral third party from an outside standpoint looking in, it is better to have someone else in the discussion. And like, I will tell this to people from time to time when they're not ready to jump headfirst into management, but they still want, to seem a little bit more official, or they're not certain they're ready, but they want to start putting that into place. I'll tell them to set up a secondary email that has, a fake name like Alex, Alex at whatever mydomain.com, just to forward the emails to and CC into the chain, because then it seems like, I have to get approval from them. Like they have final say. So it makes it more official. And I've seen it, like, from personal experience, it's easier to negotiate numbers when we're talking about specifically monetary side of things. It's easier to negotiate when it seems like there's a third party in the room. It makes it a more businessy sense to it. And a lot of times it's good at catching, otherwise issues that would fall through the cracks, because you see where they start to be more flexible when they think that they're having to talk to a third party and someone else in between.
I would think that's partially also due because, if you're the creator yourself and you're negotiating on your behalf, there's that emotion attached to it.
Right.
And where if you have a third party, they're not necessarily completely dispassionate, but they have less of kind of a stake in what's actually occurring, and they could just deal more in facts.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like the other side is, and to the topic of before, is like, when do you need that sort of support, is having the sounding board. Am I getting my value for my time in this, right? Like, when you have those conversations, having the management or someone who is knowledgeable of the space in there to say, yo, this is a really bad deal, we're better off just walking away from it. Which, like, I think that's one thing that creators do really miss out on a lot, is like, it's okay to say no to campaigns, to say, sorry, this isn't enough for my time. I would rather someone turn down 20 things and have one good campaign than take 30 things that are a waste of their time and they just end up stressed and unhappy at the end of it.
And their community tapped out from all the different...
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Like, you'll hear me say it a lot, but like, I'll tell someone if they're like, should I take this affiliate deal? I'm like, you haven't done any deals before. It's a good campaign. It gets you, like a demo of saying like, hey, we had these numbers, this metric, this engagement. Here's proof that I've worked with brands before and I'm not green. But beyond that, it's like, is this really, like, unless you're getting like thousands of dollars in product you need, like, where's the tipping point of value? And so even like having those discussions is a important one.
Makes sense.
So
go for it.
No, you're good. Go, Galen.
I'm looking at the list that we had now. We talked about questions that you should be asking. So it's, what kinds of services would you say typically? So I know this is, again, different management agency, but what suite of services would you typically expect to find in a management group? You mentioned that your clients don't necessarily use everything offered, or at least don't know to initially. So what kinds of things are typical to find, and what are some things that are less common but still out there?
Mean, there's kind of a wide array, and this industry has an even wider one than the average, right? Because this one is like, I have to turn my stream on. What software do I use, right? Like, it's finding people that are knowledgeable enough to, like, and this is like a really good question of like, having the initial conversation of like, I'm thinking about changing my streaming setup. Do you have any suggestions? And seeing what they recommend, finding out if they're knowledgeable in the space that they're claiming to work in. Right. Like, personally, I'm more technical when it comes to it than the average person, so I'm going to be much more opinionated and have my thoughts on the matter. But even just like, if they don't know what the hell a capture card is, right? Are they really qualified to help you run your business?
Right.
Stuff like that
to help you get one,
exactly,
not at cost, or not at full market,
not a crappy one even, right? Like, are they going to go to like Hobby Lobby and find an aftermarket like purchased
and Arduino, like handcrafted?
Exactly. Like, or are they going to know like, these are the brands I recommend, right? Like, if you ask me, like, I have opinions on them, none of which are the mainstream ones, but all are great product. But like, but obviously having those discussions, when we talk about services that should be offered, even just knowing that like, I can, what do I do with my money? I'm making all this money all of a sudden. What the hell do I do with it? Or discussing, analytics, metrics, understanding growth trajectory within a channel, and figuring out how to best, walk away from your stream at the end of the day succeeding. Having the conversations about like scheduling, or knowing how to, like, I've suddenly gone viral, what the fuck do I do? Having those conversations is and the answer, there is, again, no one great answer, but my answer generally with those kinds of conversations is, don't change what you're doing, right? Don't, like, working with them to avoid burnout, working with them to focus on mental well-being and just generally speaking, helping them run their business, right? Working through their emails if they don't want to deal with it themselves. Services like that, like for some of them, it's technical. I need this thing built. What the fuck do I do? Knowing that they can go out and get web developers or software developers, or in some cases building an Arduino capture card or a catapult. It's a question of understanding how resourceful the management that you're engaging is, so that you could better understand how much you can turn to them with versus how much you have to do on your own, or the middle ground between it, right? Like, obviously, if someone was like, I need to build a catapult, can you figure out how? Like, I would go ask a couple people and be like, I think we're gonna have to like go to Google on this one. Like,
So I think key takeaway there is that essentially you're looking for someone to kind of fill the gaps in your weaknesses, right? And also provide a thoughtful sounding board for your ideas, right? So, you get that thing like, I went viral on this thing. Well, how do I, make sure that I'm getting the most out of that opportunity, but then also not just becoming a meme, right?
Yeah. Or like burning out from overinvesting in resources, right?
Or mental health, even with the idea of like, oh, I hit this peak because of this virality that happened, and now the drawback happened, and now like I'm kind of in my feelings about it.
And it's having the discuss, like, from an just growth and channel longevity standpoint, it's having the discussions about the peaks and valleys that come with being an influencer in both this space and other spaces, and helping them understand it's not about the massive gain, because that massive gain is not going to be there long term, but it's providing that insight and understanding to it all, right? Like, having spent almost a decade of my life watching this, I can safely say, like, it's gonna come and it'll definitely go. And so understanding how to make the most of these situations and garnering that sort of a resource. Another one on that topic, is tech services, figuring, like, I think one thing that does bother me in the space when we get into a lot of this is, you'll see some of the websites that are like, they have a like pamphlet of like 10 pages of the services they offer, and all of it's to say, hey, we're resourceful, we can figure things out if you need help with it. It's a sales page at the end of the day, and then the question becomes, how much of that can you actually offer? Because being able to say, like, I can call a developer and have that question answered, yeah, it's a service, but it's also like, is that included, right? Like, what is going to cost me extra to have versus what is actually included in what I'm signing on for? It's some of them, it's like, yeah, you're making us $1 million a year. Sure, we can go contract out someone to redesign your brand, but
pretty
it's like,
sure Ninja
you only made us
for whatever he wants them to do.
Exactly. But the other side of that is, for example, someone's only making their like $1,000 a year for their management group, but they're like, hey, I need this help, this resource, what can we do? And it's a question of like, how scrappy is the team that they're asking willing to be on their behalf? If someone comes to me and it's like, we haven't had much revenue flow for this person, I'm still going to sit down and spend 3 hours in a call with them figuring out what we can do. I might not be able to do it myself, and I'll be very transparent with them about it, but it's like, so it's a question a lot of times of like, what services are actually available versus what services are contracted out.
Would you expect that to be something that you are sort of seeing maybe the options publicly and then like talking about them during your initial, because I mean, not only they will be potentially doing negotiating for you, but initially you're doing negotiating with them, right?
For yourself, exactly.
So would you expect that to be something that should be a big like point that you focus on? What is included?
I think it's I think it's worth having the discussion as you dive into it, right? Like, outside of just the numbers, it's like, of the services listed, what's actually available to me just for being a client of your team? Like, if I think another one to that matter that kind of crossed my mind just now is like having the discussion of, if I'm not comfortable taking a deal, what's the course?
That's a good
like
point.
Because I have definitely read some, like, I have helped oversee some people when they're like, I can't afford a lawyer. Can you at least look at this and see if there's any red flags that you would be concerned about that would warrant me contracting a lawyer to properly review this?
Right.
Which is, as a friend, I'll happily look it over. I with the preface of like, I'm not a lawyer, but I can look for a concern. And one of the things that I've noticed in some of them is like, there's no way out of contracts. If their team comes to them and is like, hey, here you go. Here's this like energy drink that may or may not cause medical harm to people and doesn't have proper warning labels or FDA approval. Like, you have to take it. You can't say no. There's a great paycheck at the end. Like, you're stuck, right? And so looking for things like that and having those discussions of like, if I'm not comfortable with the campaign, like what is the recourse for this? What is the conversation at that point? Or similarly, if you get 5 weeks into a campaign and all of a sudden the campaign is going very sideways, or the brand is causing you more backlash, understanding like how the management can help you out of those, because there's like, I've definitely seen that before. There is a brand, I'm trying to think of what I can and can't discuss with this one. There is a brand that was temporarily in the gaming space that had a mascot that looked like a member of a hate group.
Okay. Yep. Not great.
That, that as a baseline, it's like, well, the clients all of a sudden were like, I signed contracts with them prior to us ever speaking to you. They still have access to my likeness. What do we do? And that was a very real discussion that we had to, like, I wish I could make that up, but I looked at the mascot and I was sitting there in awe. My jaw hit the desk, because specifically when the creators approached the brand, like, one of which was a person of color, they went to the brand and were like, this is a problem. And the brand's like, oh, that's too bad.
Right. Oh,
all right.
So that brand had perpetual likeness, so it was a matter of figuring out how we get the creators out of that.
Right.
So even that, like, and that was 7-8 months into the contract, like, because they changed the branding and mascot midway through.
Right.
It's like having those discussions of like, what would you do in a situation like this? Like, I wish I could make this stuff up. But here we are.
Well, I mean.
So yeah.
So if you ever want to like hear all the non specific stories, find Josh at a convention when we can do that again. Josh, a couple drinks and be like, tell me your best story.
Yeah.
And he'll tell
plenty. I have plenty.
So we want to be sensitive to your time. We've got about 15 minutes left. We want to throw it in chat. If you have any questions, let us know. Put that in the chat. And then we talked at the beginning of establishing that relationship, setting expectations. But how would you go about evaluating performance? Should that be done annually, quarterly, like, what do you think?
So what are you evaluating and how often?
Right. So, and I think that it's something that goes both ways, right? They should be evaluating this as well, but it is, are we seeing opportunities? Am I losing money or time on this? Am I getting everything that I feel like I want, need, or should have based on previous discussions from this? And then in a similar capacity, right, it is a question of like, what can we be doing better, right? Going to them and saying like, hey, I feel like XYZ is taking place. Like, I had this conversation with a client not too long ago. They were like, things have been a little bit quiet lately. Is there something I could be doing better to better facilitate opportunities like this? And like, the reality is, with COVID and everything going on, like everything's been slower as a result of it. So it's like nothing on them, but having them like not being afraid to go to them and going to the people that are helping you and saying like, what could we be doing better? Having those discussions as well. I think at the end of the day, it's like, if you're relying on them, you're losing time and resources on them. And having like the discussion of like, where are we going with this? I would say quarterly might be a bit too routine for this industry at the pace that it moves some days.
Right.
Our industry is very much a hurry up and wait kind of thing.
That's never happened to Galen and I ever. I don't know what you're talking about. That's the first time I've ever heard it.
Never ever, right?
Never ever.
I think that's life as a whole some days. But yeah, so I think that it's definitely as an annual scope, having those discussions, maybe even 2 times a year, I think is a good time to sit down and have those conversations or reevaluate things seriously, because it's a business, right? If you are stagnant for more than a year in some capacities, like I have the same premise where I sit down after a year and I go, what are we doing? Are we seeing growth year over year? Are we seeing at least consistency, right? Is our time being used well? And how can we do better is always a question to ask. I think that I wouldn't look at it too routinely because things happen, right? Like recently in our industry, there has been some turmoil, and amidst that turmoil, a lot of people took some time to step away and recover. Right. So like, if that's a month of time for some people, suddenly that quarter is a third gone versus a sixth or a 12th. Right. So it's a question of, scale of time as well.
And I think part of that too goes to what you were saying earlier around the discussion around services, but also just making sure you have a management group that you can talk with and say, hey, I need to take time off for XYZ, life happens, world happens, that kind of a thing. Or, the piece around like, them even being able to come to you and say, hey, things are slow right now. Like we're seeing this across the board. It's not just you. Cause I know I definitely had content creators where clients were like, things slowed down and they were sitting there wondering, is this a me thing versus an industry thing? And both are very different, or even a time of year thing, right?
Yeah. Which there is
kids just went back to school. My viewership tanked. Like, well,
yeah, do you see like seasonality in terms of working with brands and companies? Like, obviously, when the budget gets set, that's a key time. But any other seasonalities that you see?
There is, and the interesting thing is that not every company is on the same calendar as others. Mm-hmm. For example, Microsoft's fiscal year is not the same as some of the others, or it varies from different from one to the other. So I think that there is some. I know it was more apparent in the older days of Twitch. There was a term called adpocalypse, where in January and February, which is a lot of times when digital ad groups were a little bit more restricted in their budgets, Twitch would run out of ads, and ads were a big source of revenue for people early on, and have thankfully started to see a resurgence in that capacity. But at a early point in Twitch, when that was a revenue source as people's primary focus, I remember there was a year where the only thing that, like, for I think a solid 2 weeks, the only ad Twitch was running was a Spanish Starburst ad.
Oh my god! And the viewers, at that point, are going to kill whoever they can if that ad's been running for 2 weeks.
I watched it 10 times in a day on average for 2 weeks.
I had that sometimes, and it is the worst.
It is. So yeah, I like there to answer the question. Yes, there is a lot of seasonality to it. As brands have flexibility and budget, I think you do start to see that a lot more consistently. Another seasonality-esque thing to be mindful of is release cycles, right? When is, for game studio, when is a company releasing their product? For merchandise, right? You see spring, summer, and fall, winter releases. So it's, if they're going to do product promotion on apparel, you're more likely to see it in those timeframes, right around the tipping point of new release on product, as opposed to suddenly it's in the middle of February and you're sitting there going, why am I not seeing deals from, my favorite t-shirt company? Well, it's because they're not doing a release. So their marketing is a lot more mitigated right now as they prep for bigger launches. Things like that to be cognizant of, which is a much more round the calendar sort of conversation.
And I would say, how much work do you do to prep your clients for that kind of thing in advance? Not just reactionary, they are noticing a deficit, but how much are you doing in advance of
I think it's a 50-50, right? As you get into the discussions, there is some worth note, but it's also, you'll see a lot of refresher come up. I think that is.
Oh yeah, probably, someone could tell me something that's really insightful and interesting and data driven, and I might still forget it a week later because of whatever the hell was going on.
Exactly. So it's I definitely think that there's a point in the conversation where you have to revisit it and have the conversation again, right? I'll have people ping me like, "Hey, how are things? Have we heard anything about XYZ campaigns?" And it's like, their marketing budget just went on freeze, which pandemic and world events do really impact those.
Yeah.
I know a company that a couple companies in particular, like tech companies right now, are all locked down on budgets because who the hell knows what's going on. And there's more to that conversation, and that's some of those topics, but it's people are trying to be mindful of their jobs and stability for themselves so that they can continue to do this in 2 years or a year and a half for a year from now once things return to normal. So I think that there's, it's a mindfulness that has to be revisited from time to time. for a lot of those sorts of things.
I didn't see any questions come in. So, Josh, I think I'm going to do this with everybody, but you have the opportunity. We'll clip it. I bet you they'll post it to YouTube. What's the one thing you want to tell creators either to do or not to do?
Don't call your tips donations.
Okay, there it is.
That is the one thing, because that kills me on the inside.
Gotcha. Oh, we have a question. We have a question. Yeah, but do not call your tips donations. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Do you want to cue that up, Galen? I see you reading it.
So if a company comes to me offering a site server, and you're not sure if you want to join them, there's a case for getting an agent to look into the company to see if they have, because potentially they have extra resources to analyze it. A site service.
I definitely okay. Having a sounding board of someone who's just cognizant of the space to make sure that the services you're being offered are legit is a huge one. Like I have near daily conversations with clients vetting companies. I was approached by this Band-Aid company, and did these Band-Aids work? What are the reviews like? Just stuff like that. Even I have looked at some of the weirdest companies in the world just trying to vet them.
So next time I get killed in COD, I know that that person definitely had gamer Band-Aids. 100%. Yes. Only reason I lost that fight.
So yeah, I think to answer that question, I believe that there's immense value, and it is something that they should all be very cognizant of, right? If they aren't capable of vetting brands, that's a big red flag to me, because as someone who, even just a lot of it is common sense, fact checking, due diligence, a lot of Google foo, and just understanding the brands, right? If they're not a legit brand, I will reference, I had an insurance company brought to a few of my clients, and I went and did some serious digging on that insurance company, and it was a terrible insurance company. And I basically had the conversation of yeah, this is a decent amount of money, but if you're asking me my honest opinion, I'm telling you up front, this is a bad deal.
And ultimately, here's the bigger point, and you're getting to it, I think, is that you were attaching your brand to them. And if it's a terrible product that you can't stand behind and you don't even use, or, how is that going to damage you? Right?
Yep. And I'll toss it out there as just a point of reference, right? If you are ever uncertain, I will happily vet something. If you were I'm about to use this service or this company or work on a promotion, I'm not sure if I trust it though. Is this legit? I will happily take a look. I would rather spend 10 minutes of my day and look something over than know someone got screwed over in the long run. So if there's ever one in question, feel free to reach out.
Grid. And I'd say too, Grid, part of what it's worth thinking about there is how big is the opportunity, right? If like Josh was saying with the insurance company, if it's someone coming to you with serious cash, it becomes, I think, even more worth it to have someone come vet it. If it's here's $50 and you're like, yeah, they give me a bad feeling, you're like, well,
it's $50.
What are you losing out on, right? You're losing out on a nice meal.
Yeah, and I had the conversation with someone not too long ago.
You may need the $50, but if it's $50 that then tarnishes your reputation because of who you're tied to, in the long run, it's a bad play.
I'll reference a discussion I had recently. There was a online gambling company that it was a casino, poker, etc. sort of company that approached a client for promotion, and I basically had the conversation of where's the tipping point of where this is a feasibly good, assuming we sit down with the lawyers and everything checks out legally, right? Where are we drawing the line in the sand of what's worth it versus where you're promoting gambling to your audience, right? Because it can fully tarnish someone's reputation when it comes to that stuff. So it's year or two salary is compensation for a promotion, okay,
right?
There's a gamble to be had there in that regard, but if it was the same rate that we would get for promoting McDonald's or a food company, yikes, not necessarily worth it unless that's where your content is already centered. But if they're trying to get to your audience through you as a proxy, the question needs to be asked routinely of what does this stand to do to my brand? And obviously who's going to expect the peripheral company to have a racist mascot? But like, so like, that's a gamble that like, who's going to take that one? But that said, like,
somebody will though.
When you get into the
people serve company, and yet,
yeah, it's like, so having that conversation of like weighing out just the question of like, if I'm promoting this product to my audience, is this a safe promotion to take? Or is it being well compensated enough that I'm okay taking this gamble? The conversation comes up a lot around mobile games, right? Because a lot of audiences aren't open to mobile games, but it's like, if the paycheck's really good, you interested? And it's like, and you can make it so like, it gets into the like the nuances of campaigns, but it's like, and this is a conversation, like these are conversations worth having as well, right? Like, are they willing to help you plan out how you're doing the promotion? We sit down and discuss the like, how memey can we make this campaign when it comes to mobile games, or like how much fun can we have with this?
I have some clients that are, admittedly, they would never stream a mobile game, but to me, in conference, like they're mobile game whales. Like they they love the product, but they just like would never stream it. And so it's funny.
I've had this very conversation with someone recently about that. Like, their jam is PUBG Mobile, but they're like, I would never stream this in my life, but I play it like 10 hours a day. Like, and then it's a question of like, well, if this is clearly an extreme hobby of yours and the right offers in place, cool. Are you comfortable with that? And having the conversation of where you're willing to, have that cutoff point.
The most poorly kept secret that everyone should know is PUBG Mobile is huge. It's absolutely massive.
Yes.
So that's a good tip for people. All right, so we're up on time. I didn't see any other questions come in. So you want to do your thing, Galen?
I've got one for Josh.
Oh, okay.
When does the Broaden website go live?
I've been avoiding doing it. I know I've left it at a coming soon very strategically. I had like the thing is like I haven't wanted to make it a focal point. It was always an intent of helping people.
Right.
That said, we started actually fleshing out a website specifically because we just needed to catch some extra traffic of people going, who the fuck are these guys?
Well, and authenticity too. Hey, this is broad, and then you don't have a website. It's like,
there was a point where I had the discussion with my team of, one of my favorite companies to reference that did this for a very long time was Sunshine and Sachs. They were a PR agency or PR firm, PR company. Their website was a single solid background color. It had their 3 offices addresses, which tells you everything you need to know. They had 3 offices. Nice. And it was a contact us page. And then it had the logo. And that was it. That was the entire page. And I love that because it was like, our work speaks for itself was really the stance that they had. And like I don't want to be inundated with aimless requests. I want to be able to service the guys. So like having a website as a honeypot for like catching the one-offs, I've avoided it. So yes, to answer your question, that website will be there eventually. I know that Tom has been working on it. He is waiting on me for some of the content on it, and then we compiled the content, and it was just like, are we ready? Which is why this is the I know I do, Joel. I know I need to get some interns. A lot of it's like do we want that yet? Like I said, this is the first time I've ever publicly discussed Broaden. We've been doing what we've been doing for 2.5 years now.
That's what I was saying. I think I saw the site first 2 years ago or more. Yeah.
I've never wanted to have that public face because it's just, we haven't had the need for it yet. It's very like, we are at a point where we are ready to grow, and I wanted to make sure that what we had was in place and established before we ever really took on the public marketing and being the noisy one in the presence of it all. It's just, I've wanted to make sure that we had our clients happy and comfortable and made sure that what we were doing was right for our guys before I ever put anything forward as like marketing and attention grabbing.
And people know who you and Joel know.
That's the thing, right? Like at the center of the industry, like the people that need to know us, and the people that don't they'll find out eventually.
Yep.
And the brands that we work with, it's like if a client is like, talk to these guys, they're still going to talk to us. It's not like it's the end of those. So it's like the only thing that we're really losing out on is having that validation and marketing piece, which like to me, my work speaks for itself. If I put my hands on it. I'm stubborn, and I think that is echoed by my team. And
yes, I've heard your team so many times tell me how stubborn you are. So,
God, I am. I'm really set in my ways.
so will you give us a quick, just rehash summary of who you are and why we talked with you today?
So my name is Josh. I have been in the gaming industry for just shy of a decade. I started out as a shoutcaster and commentator at Curse, which has since been acquired by Twitch. I was not there during the acquisition. I was only there for about 9 months, which was around the duration of the contract. My now one of my business partners and I met working there, and we've been together working on projects since. From there, I went on to be a tech director at a game studio. And helped build out an esports production arm of the company that has since branched off into its own company. From there, I went to work on charity stuff directly at a charity, and then transition over to consulting for Tiltify. And while I was doing all of that, from around when I was working as a tech director to now, I've been managing streamers in various capacities. So I have had a very weird workaholic infused lifestyle in the space that I've had my hands on everything. When I was at the game studio, I worked on paid campaigns going out to creators, and now I work on paid campaigns coming in towards them. So I guess at the end of the day, I just like helping people succeed is really what it boils down to.
And on Twitch, as people are saying, he's Santa, one of the few
yes.
marks that you'll see who not only doesn't stream anymore, but really never did. He's the rare check mark because everyone wants him to have a check mark because he does so much helpful shit and requires the partner test check mark.
What are you doing for? Hold on. So what are you doing for leisure right now? Anything? You still grinding?
Okay. So there's a two-part answer to that. There is what I normally would do for leisure.
Yep.
Not pandemic world, which is I'm a nerd when it comes to photography and kayaking. Those are my two outlets in life. That and travel, obviously, which is like, mix of career and life. But I love traveling and taking photographs of nature and kayaking. Hunter and I, who is in chat, which I agree, Hunter, there is a show to be had there. Hunter and I have had some great conversations about a lot of it. And watches. I am a watch nerd. So there's hobbies outside of this world. In the gaming world, I this weekend got roped into a bit of Minecraft.
Love it.
Valorant and Call of Duty have been a lot of the guilty pleasures, and Neon Abyss is a big one. It is roguelike dungeon crawler Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon genre. Similarly, Soda Dungeon 2. I have guilty pleasure in auto clickers. Moblord, who is a friend of a lot of the people within the StreamerSquare community, as well as the streaming community as a whole. And I have this guilty pleasure where we get into clicker games together, specifically the ones where you can idle and attend to it once a day or a couple times a day. So we are currently in the middle of a race to get to level 10,000 of Soda Dungeon 2 together.
That is the most degen thing I've heard today. Well done. That is awesome.
That is so. Yes, there's hobbies outside of this that I will feed at various capacities. The Soda Dungeon and Minecraft have been at the last week or two. I've been kind of taking a break from Valorant because I was waiting on the new season to get underway. But yeah, that's if we get into the nitty gritty of what I do outside of that, I am very much a consumer. When I walked away from my game studio job, I realized I had lost my love for consuming the thing that got me into this in the first place, which was playing video games. So I make it an active effort on my part to at least set out a couple hours a day to consume and love the thing that I ultimately center my career and life around.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Ernest, what's your? I know earlier today we had a call where you were furiously clicking through Diablo.
Oh, no, yeah. So I'm playing.
Who are you? And then what's your current guilty pleasure?
I'm Ernest Jones. I am a CPA that helps broadcasters, influencers, Instagrammers, cosplayers, anything and under.
TikTokers? I don't know if
TikTokers, sure. Yeah, I got them all.
Entertainers.
Entertainers. Yeah, new media entertainers.
That's the market that I have found myself in. It is, how can we help people in the digital world?
Yep.
Oh, my God. Brief aside, my summer intern, financial planning student, not at all involved in the gaming world, but she was super interesting, like her resume interviewed well, that kind of thing. And I felt so old when we were talking about a client, and I was like, "Yeah, so she's on TikTok." She's like, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." And I was like, "Really?" Because I feel like I don't.
And
this is
TikTok's another one. I actively became a consumer of that because we were trying to understand the analytics within it because there really aren't any. So understanding growth and everything within the platform, like I now consume TikTok for at least 30 minutes a day while I'm laying in bed and unable to sleep at night. That is what I started doing. Which when you think about it, that's only 30 to 40 TikToks that I scroll through, but like I started scrolling through and understanding the platform. God, that is a whole other medium that
I'm grinding out Diablo 3 seasonal hardcore right now.
Ooh.
So if you need a power level, Josh, I'm around. And Galen, go on.
Those are my guilt.
Demon Hunter's very fun this season, Joshy.
Don't even get me started. Demon Hunter was my class that I had the prior to them nerfing Inferno difficulty into the ground on the first release of Diablo. I cleared it with Demon Hunter, not the flip heavy build, but a like Mimi one, which was life on hit. With
you were doing the elemental arrow life on hit.
No, not elemental arrow. It was the lightning ball, life on hit. Because it procs more than any other skill in the game for life on hit. So I made a life on hit build, got a very high health pool, and spent an hour and a half right-clicking aggressively to kill it. I also Diablo 2 is my I will play Diablo 2 over 3 any day of the week.
Fair.
I have over 5,500 hours in Diablo 2.
We're getting into the side, but I want to say simply, yes. Diablo ultimately is a game about clicking. That's why Josh loves clicker games. Galen, take us home. Who are you? And yada yada.
Yes, a lot of sidetracks, so I apologize. I am Galen Cortina. I'm a financial planner, so Ernest helps streamers and, as he said, general new media make sure that they are properly reporting and accounting for what they've done so far. My job is to help make sure that, and I would say, and Josh's job is to help people earn more money, and my job is to make sure that they don't blow it all and they're actually thinking about the future a little bit. And on my end, oh my god, I've been playing so much Monster Train. The again, roguelike card deck builder. Like
I avoided playing it. I watched someone play it and I recognized the addiction that it would form.
So I've been playing a bunch of Monster Train, and then I had a friend give me get a release day PS4, and he got a PS4 Pro, and I'd never had a PS4, so he gave it to me, and so I played Horizon Zero Dawn, which was great. And I just started like 2 days ago playing Spider-Man, which is amazing. I know I'm way behind the times, but it is so good.
I am tasking you with one. If you haven't played it, you need to go play Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, I saw that look really good too. I will.
It is hands down, I would argue, the best PlayStation title. Maybe Last of Us, I think, could contest it.
I have
of all time.
I have The Last of Us. I just haven't started it yet because everyone's told me it's a game that I'll love and that it's very sad and touching. And I found myself with my 11-month-old unable to. My threshold for that kind of a thing is a lot lower now that I have a baby.
I would say give it a year or two then. But it is one of the, I would say, Last of Us crafted one of the best stories in gaming history.
So eventually that'll be me. Anyway, all of that is to say thank you everyone for coming out and listening to us blabber today. Josh was super helpful talking about management and agency because it's a really important topic, and it's one that
we'll be discussing 2 more times.
Exactly. And I would say just in general, like in my clients' careers, it becomes increasingly prominent the longer you've been around and the more successful you are. So knowing about that early on and knowing how you should approach it makes a really big difference. Thank you, Ernest. Thank you, Josh. We will talk with all of you next week.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.